So we just read Four Dogs and a Bone by John Patrick Shanley.
Mm-hmm.
We get into a discussion, just a couple of fun facts that I found about the show. So it premiered in 1993 in Manhattan Theater Club. And it starred Mary Louise Parker, Tony Roberts, Draper, and Lauren Dean. But also it did a 1995 performance in LA at the same time as Get Shorty that came out. That had Brendan Fraser and Martin Short in two of the lead roles. I the article about it from 1995. And Parker Posey.
Ooh, she's great.
So, a couple of fun facts out there, but just to get you guys all talking about it, what were your initial thoughts after we've finished reading through this play?
I would like to just say that opening few lines, or those opening few lines, goddamn, that's the way to open up a show.
It's a very it gives the speech is a good way of setting the tone for what we're about to experience with this. As you find out later on that she's told that same speech to everyone that she's come in contact with. It's like, oh, this is something you just say to each other now. This is how you open your new friendships, isn't it, Brenda?
Mm-hmm.
It is a deeply cynical kind of play, where like even the guy that you kind of feel for at first turns out to just be like everybody else.
Mm. Well, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Typically, someone like Victor can kind of become corrupted in the world of Hollywood, right? He started
any world, frankly. Actually, I mean that's just the way things go. Depressingly.
Tyler, you had something I think to add?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna really repeat what you said, because we do see Victor initially in just like a kind of depressing, vulnerable place that we do feel for, but he kind of just succumbs to what the audience probably understands, like what happens in the biz. But I hope that when people see this, they're not like, that's how everything really goes. But then again, at this caliber, I don't really know if that's how it goes either. Let's be real. And Victor, like, you feel for him, and in a way, in the end, I still feel for him in the end. I don't know if I think that he fully goes down to everybody else's level. I'm not sure. It's a very interesting analysis when it comes to him.
Yeah, Amanda.
I think it's definitely a point that Victor, through most of the play until the end, seems like the only one trying to keep any integrity to the art and the craft. And then that just congratulations.
Okay, thank you.
I couldn't not.
They're like, you're on camera, and I'm like, I don't care.
Okay.
I want to shower you with love. Thank you.
Oh,
Sorry.
oh.
Yeah, sorry. No, I got too excited. Yeah, but so he's the only character that tries to keep any integrity throughout most of the play, and then finally where an opportunity arises for him to then be the director as well, he all of a sudden is just as cutthroat as everybody else. And it's interesting, in the beginning of the script, he includes some quotes from the ancients on the film business, which I don't know if you guys had a chance to look, but some of them are, savage is he who saves himself by Leonardo da Vinci. Among other evils which being unarmed brings you, it causes you to be despised, Machiavelli. And victory shifts from man to man, from the Iliad. I love the treason but hate the traitor, Julius Caesar. Like, just a lot of funny little quotes in the beginning that I think really encapsulate the piece.
That's the original don't hate the player, hate the game.
Yeah, for real.
Ben, I think it's a very interesting take from someone who is known primarily as a playwright and their experience in Hollywood. It always strikes me as odd that this came out in 1993 because it still feels oddly relevant in a lot of ways. I think because it does tap into that cynical side of filmmaking, or just maybe even the arts in general. Like everybody is, it sometimes is about who you know. Like Brenda gets cast because her stepbrother is famous, and they're like, oh yeah, no, this was the thing that set you apart from the other actors. Amos, you have the face of someone about to say something.
Well, so I feel like it speaks not just to the filmmaking experience, but specifically to what a playwright's view of filmmaking would be, because someone who goes into screenwriting as a screenwriter the whole way, they know that all sorts of stuff happens. Your script is probably going to get mangled. You're probably going to get fired and rewritten, or you might be brought in to rewrite someone else, and that's it. So I think it, in some ways it's cynical, but in some ways it's also like waking up and realizing what game you decided to play. So, you could say don't hate the player, hate the game, but also like you took the check. You chose to make this a screenplay instead of a play, and it's also kind of funny with John Patrick Shanley, because I kind of wonder about some of his experiences, because to my mind he wrote one of my absolute all-time favorite movies. He wrote Moonstruck. It was beautifully acted, beautifully directed. Everything about it came together perfectly. Cher gave an amazing acting performance. Like, he had one of the most like touched by the gods experiences a playwright can possibly have writing a movie. So I wonder what happened then. Like, what happened on Congo, buddy? And also, like, he ended up directing after that. Like, he directed Joe versus the Volcano. He directed, I think he directed Doubt when they made a movie of it, right?
Oh wow.
And so I wonder what happened along the way, where he went from this touched by the gods experience to whatever informed this to directing himself.
Well, and you wonder, as you say, like touched by the gods and spirit experience for Moonstruck, and is that like, have you read about his experience, or is it just like because it was such a well finished film that you think it was so perfect? Like, I wonder if some of this may have happened during that too, but we're only seeing the final
Oh yeah,
piece of it.
There are good movies where you then find out later that the director was in over their head and someone else had to do it. Like, Val Kilmer just came out and talked about how Kurt Russell really directed Tombstone because the director was, completely overwhelmed, and that stuff happens. But like, that movie's so good. It's so good that I don't know. Like, he wrote Nicolas Cage's best performance. I will stand by that take.
That's fair. So this actually kind of led us into the next question, which is like, it does seem that John Patrick Shanley's taking some shots at Hollywood with this play. Do you think, as we've kind of touched upon, like, it's clearly, it might be about his experiences, but do you guys agree with him that it's a little cynical, or do you guys have a little bit more optimistic view on how Hollywood and such are run?
I mean, with all my Hollywood experience, I'd say I've only had great things to say about being a background actor at SNL. They treat you okay. But seriously, I mean, it's weird. I think it comes from like a different point of view. It's like, what you think of something like what Jerry Seinfeld always says. He's like, it's not like show fantasy or something like that, show business. And he takes a very like even-handed approach on things. And he's like, hey, we don't have to be so like artsy-fartsy about things. Like, we have to make practical decisions. And somebody who maybe is more attuned or has more of an affinity to a lot of the creativity and artistic qualities may find that view unsettling and may think like, hey, that's selling out in a way. But yeah.
I think it's only about movies and film, plays, or Is it about life in general and how when people get to a certain position and they can get to a higher position, it might require them to give up some of their original beliefs. I think you see that all the time. So I don't know if it's only about Hollywood. I think it's just about a lot of people's attempts at success and what that leads to. You know.
But writers have a lot more power in the theater, and the script is treated as a lot more sacred in the theater. Whereas, you know, you might have 12 different writers on a movie if an executive panics and has too much money to throw around.
Yeah.
Andre, I saw your hand go up, and then Tyler.
Amanda, why don't you were waiting, so.
Oh, that's okay.
Sorry.
I was just gonna say that I think it's interesting all the jabs between film and theater. Usually, the styles of acting can be very different, and trying to learn. And now I feel that there's so many more crossovers than there used to be. Or just like the styles and things. And I know certain actors may feel like, oh, but that's just like film acting, or like, oh, that's stage, like that's so overplayed, exactly how they were saying. And I almost wonder what the piece would be about, either a film made about how a play is then made and treasured and kept and or not, or, like if that's just the producers, or if it's something the opposite way, like if it were a play about how the plays got made from this perspective, if it would be as cynical, or is it just always going to be one of those poo-poo kind of moments on the other style?
I don't think it just speaks to maybe Hollywood. Similar to what Gary said, I kind of feel like it speaks to, unfortunately, life and trying to move ahead. You feel like, what do you have to give up or sacrifice in order to move ahead in a particular, I don't know, industry? And for some reason, I just thought about politics and politicians, and the fact that we get this, during election time, we get this really big act of what I'm going to do and how I'm going to save the country and what can I do for you. And the thing I always hate to hear is what the American people want. This is what people want. This is what people want. And then they get into office and everything gets kind of chopped up, or you never get what you really want. Or I almost wondered, like, is this like what a candidate does? Like, they have all these grandiose plans of how to save the world, and then they finally get in office and get that power, and then you have other people like, nah, I can't do that. Sorry, you can't do that. That won't happen. That kind of reminded me of this play reminded me of that.
Yeah, I definitely think that's fair. I mean, I think what the seedy underbelly, unfortunately, with a lot of that is just how much anything like that costs. I mean, speaking as someone who has directed shows before, I can have a lot of ideas, but when I go to talk to somebody and they go like, oh yeah, no, that's more than our budget allows for, or that's more than the space allows, it makes it a lot more difficult. You have to have those hard conversations for sure. But and then Tyler, I'm sorry, we're gonna swing back around to you.
Oh, you're totally fine. I think something to think about is when this play was written. This was produced in 93, so it was probably written in like 92, maybe even before then. And to kind of just think about how far we've come in terms of how Hollywood is run. Like the whole conversation between Victor and Colette about, you want to suck my dick, right? Like all of that. That's something that's so, at least to our knowledge thus far of how Hollywood is run, that's something that's just not going to fly by in this time. So I think the language is really, really interesting to think about. And when it comes to like the actually scene 1 between Colette and Brenda, I like read this and I'm like, girls don't act like this, do they? And I was then like rushed back to a memory. I was doing a new work and it was 2 women, 2 men. And the women, there were constant rewrites. And it felt like the women were like fighting to be the lead. And it kind of just rammed me back into this. And I was like, it's because I keep thinking as I'm listening to this scene, I was like, girls don't really act like this. Like, this can't be true. And then I'm like, oh no, this has a nugget of truth to it because I've physically seen this. And I don't know where I'm going with this. I felt like I had a point with this. I feel like I always have a point and I'd never get there. But I just find this really fascinating how people think fighting for the lead is important when it's, at least in my mind, I'm like, if you're memorable, you're memorable in the end of it. And I don't know. I think there's something interesting and truthful, a nugget of truthfulness in that scene. I just think it's interesting and kind of fun.
If I can interject before Josue makes his point just on that specifically, I'm so sorry.
Yes.
But like, how many open calls have you gone to that it's like, oh my God, hi, it's so good to see you. I missed you. Oh, I love your dress.
Legit, I kind of ignore that. If I see somebody I genuinely like, I'll talk to them. Like, that's
Some
me
people
though.
genuinely like them, but there's so many people, you can hear the tone of their voices changing. Like, they don't care about them. Anyway.
You're okay, yeah. I hear you. I hear
I love
you
your
now.
bracelet. Where'd you get that?
I
This way,
actually,
go ahead.
oh,
Yeah, that actually. Thank you for interjecting, because I actually was going to ask, because similar to what back to what you were saying before, Amanda, about how, like, this is a playwright poo-pooing on Hollywood. Like, can you write a similar treatment of like poo-pooing on theater? Like, are people that cutthroat? Because, like, almost everybody in this play is like cutthroat in their own way and just trying to like get above each other and get over one another. Like, does that also happen in theater? I have like way less experience in that, but so what Amanda was saying, like, that does happen at the audition, during audition time, but does that happen backstage? Are people who are trying to like get rewrites or like, oh, maybe I should have that line, or I don't know. Does that happen?
I don't think so much with changing the script. I don't know about when it's in labs and stuff of that nature, but I have definitely heard stories about certain Broadway shows that choreographers pit their dancers against each other to have that kind of, because it was within line of the show that the ensemble members wouldn't like each other in such a way. So then the choreographer would be like, oh, and everyone in the cast was like shady balls to each other.
Oh, wow.
I definitely, there's also a mix of people. Like, obviously everyone here is wonderful and super supportive of each other and not that kind of way, for the most part. But I would say there's definitely, like, even on a college level, like going to my college, there were some of each. There were super sweet, nice people. And then there were people that would talk behind your back and would push you down the stairs the second they got a chance. I remember there was a community theater production that I did a long time ago. I forget which show it was at this point, but there was a girl who was 15 or 16 at the time, and I had the comedic, funny best friend sidekick, as I love and usually have. And she was much younger than me. I had finished college already, so I was like 21, 22. And this girl was like, if you weren't in this, I would have that part. I hope an air conditioner falls on you. I was like, what? You're gonna murder me. You're 15. Anyway, now we're friends, but she grew up. She's 14 now. But I will never forget that. I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna get my ankle broken for real.
but that's still in the corner of your mind, right?
That was
How nice someone is now. They said that. I remember. I keep it tucked away somewhere just in case.
Every time
Amos,
you walk in front. You walk in front of me.
Amos, were you going to say something a little bit earlier?
Well, for one thing, I was going to say that Josue clearly, I put it in the chat, but Josue clearly needs to see All About Eve. But also, I was going to say, whenever I see something like actors being all like, oh, so good to see you, or on the occasion that they've done that to me, I always feel like that is sneakily an audition they're failing. because to me, if you're an actor and you can't hide that you're being really like base level manipulative, then how good an actor are you? Like, practice in your day-to-day life. Hide the fact that you're snowing me. Hide the fact that you hate this person. Like, you're indicating.
Audition tips.
Oh no, I definitely think that's a process.
Yeah, your second one should be convincing too.
Yeah, and I definitely think it's a process. It's my, I think it's a process that's in every kind of industry when it comes to this. Whether you want the bigger chair and the bigger solo in a concert piece, or the larger role in a movie or a film, like you definitely suck up to different people, and I think it's all different parts of the process. I think when you're working on a new work in the theater, yeah, if you're an actor and you can improv a line that gets a laugh, it's more than likely that might get into the bit. You know, if you're a background actor in a film, you know, I think maybe Amos and Josue maybe could speak to this a little bit better, but like, if you do something that's a little bit more memorable, you might find yourself having a line or a moment that you didn't have when it originally happened. You know, there's always a way of, I guess, manipulating the system. I think it's just a matter of, do you do it to the expense of other people?
It's funny that, oh, sorry, go ahead, Amos.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, it's funny that you should mention that. I'm a really big fan of the show Deadwood, from like 15 years ago at this point, but I loved it so much a while ago that I bought the series on DVD, and I really love listening to the commentary tracks. And basically the thing about extras and background actors really getting exposure by being interesting was such a thing on the set of that show. Like somebody would catch the director or somebody's eye and be like, that person, that's amazing. I want to see more of that person. And they would write whole roles for those people, like just to get into the show. I don't know. I thought that was kind of cool.
That's crazy. I'd never heard that.
Amos, you were going to say something?
Well, I was just also going to say, like, obviously in this case, you know, this is satire, so who knows how true anything would be. But also, I also think it speaks to different people create different kinds of spaces, and of course that's going to be true in filmmaking, it's going to be true in theater, and you know, there are certain people who are known as extremely abusive bosses, and when their assistants go out into the world and become executives themselves, their leadership style tends to be like that. And if you're working on something where the person running the show, like Bradley in this case, is a cynical, conniving person, of course the people who are brought in and the way they behave is going to be like that. There are people who run things in a really warm, inclusive way, and the way they treat each other most of the time would reflect that difference, you know?
Well, that's a funny point too. Oh, no, I'm not muted. That's a funny point too, though, when you think about the opening speech that gets repeated multiple times. She's talking about incest and molestation and things in the speech. However, it says, it's a chain. My father doesn't show his feelings, like sort of a thing. And it is that sort of a, not in those words, like you just so lovingly put it, but yeah, the trickle down of how a boss or a family or somebody treats you often is how you then treat other people or grow up to be, or sometimes you go polar opposite because you didn't like how you were treated and you overcorrect to be the other way. But that's an interesting point.
Yeah.